Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, Ingenious Thinkers, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. With me today is Sunshine Tenasco, founder of Braids and Powwow Pitch, a nonprofit organization supporting Indigenous entrepreneurs across Turtle Island. Welcome, Sunshine.
Hi, thank you for having me.
That's maybe the most positive welcome. It just came out of my mouth. I said, welcome, Sunshine. I'm going, wow, that's a very positive, upbeat way to introduce it. It's wonderful to have you here. Can I start with something? You talk about Turtle Island. Now, doing a little research, that has historically sometimes referred to North America.
Yeah.
Is that what you are referring to?
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of take it for granted. I assume that people know this because most of the people in my circles all know this teaching and stuff. But yeah, we refer to that as Turtle Island, based on our sort of origin story.
Very cool. So that sort of, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more of the origin story, because for me, that sort of talks to a togetherness of all of the indigenous peoples across North America. Am I interpreting that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have this divide here in Canada, US, this and that. We don't see those lines. Those were forced upon us as human beings, but we see our indigenous brothers and sisters, south of the border. They're the same as like, Ontario, Quebec, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's sort of a unified way of seeing the world and the way that we do things, I guess.
Working with that, so then, and I didn't think of it as a skill. Powwow pitch, tell us about that. And you say that's from across Turtle Island, so from across North America. Tell us about the history of it and how you reach the different entrepreneurs from such a wide area.
Yeah, so it's sort of like an ever evolving project that started out just in Ottawa at a local powwow because I went on Dragon's Den and that changed my whole life. And I had never felt so supportive in that particular goal of mine was to open a baby moccasin online shop. And so it was such a gift. And I didn't realize that there weren't a lot of Indigenous people at that time because it was now like 15 years ago. So that's quite a while. And so I said, how do we bring this to our communities? And powwow, there's all these vendors that are around, there's the drum, there's the dancers, the spectators, and all of these vendors. So everybody's always doing trade and they are entrepreneurs. And so we're just sort of reawakening to that word of entrepreneurship and knowing what that means. And so I started Powwow Pitch. Basically, it was modeled after my experience on Dragon's Den. And it's a pitch competition and they get mentored, which is such a huge part of what we do by business leaders. And then they pitch again, and then we give the entrepreneurs money. And it's just that simple. And I didn't realize the magic that that would have both for the entrepreneurs, which I kind of figured there would be magic in that space, but also for the mentors. So for if, the non-Indigenous mentors who showed up, they had never been to a POW. They had never seen such a vibrant community. They had never, it was all these stereotypes that come to mind when you think of Indigenous people. And there's this whole other space that's so positive and good. And so I knew after the first one in 2015, I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, this is, I'm going to have to do this again because it was just sort of a for funsy thing. So now we have an online version that goes across Turtle Island, North America. And we also travel down to the States. Like we've gone to Santa Fe, we've gone to Albuquerque, New Mexico, we've gone to Hawaii, and we bring our model and just to encourage entrepreneurship and also to connect all the entrepreneurs from across Turtle Island to see what everybody is up to and to gain inspiration and hopefully collaborate, so yeah.
That's very cool. I mean, because you're really creating a community, and if I understand, a support system for the entrepreneurs and a connectivity again across such a large area. How does that work? How has it sort of evolved?
So before it was, like I said, just the one in-person one in Ottawa.
Mhm.
Now we choose a few powwows. So depending on where we are across Turtle Island, 5 to 7 per year. And
Okay.
then we have an online version where people could submit their 60-second pitch. And so just get that. And then so it's narrowed down. But whoever wins the in-person powwow pitch skips through the semifinal and just goes straight through to the final round where we give away 25,000 in the grand finale. So
Very
yeah.
cool. And have you been able to track sort of the successes or where some of the companies are at?
Yeah, like we actually, one of our alumni, they started an alumni fund
Hmm.
within Powwow Pitch. So and now some of our first and second powwow pitchers, they're now part of our board. We have an advisory council, and it's just like they tell us and they tag us in things. So it's mostly organic at this point. But we're working on really, for our funders because they want to see how our entrepreneurs are doing as well. So yeah.
Very cool. Is there a company or two you can mention, like their products or what's out there?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I like one of my favorites is Michaeli Lazor. She was one of our first powwow pitchers, and she runs Sequoia soaps, and she just came in
Mhm.
and said the one thing she wanted to do with $5,000 was change her branding, because when she was in person selling, she would do very well, but as soon as she wasn't there, like she wouldn't do as
Sure.
well. And that's all she did was change her branding, and she's just been skyrocketing ever since. And it's such, she creates employment now within her community. She has this whole setup where, there's like 15 full-time staff, and she just created this out of her mind, out of what she did, and now
Mhm.
she employs 15 people, and I think that's something to celebrate. And we have other people who it's beadwork, and they are, self-sufficient doing beadwork, and that's a success too. So we don't just look at like, wow, you're employing and you're so huge and the monetary, value of your company, but if you are able to be home and create, be self-sufficient, wow, like we need to celebrate that too.
Those are wonderful examples. I mean, and so many lessons. One, it doesn't always take $1 million to make that small change. That $5,000 story and recognizing that, that one area that you can improve is amazing story for all entrepreneurs and employment or self-sustainability. That's wonderful. It must feel great to watch this evolve and see the impact on more than just the entrepreneurs themselves.
Like I really feel in my heart, it's like reconciliation in practice, in life, like, and we see
Mhm.
it time and time again, especially at our live events. Like you can just feel it happening.
So let's talk about your journey a little bit. You mentioned Dragon's Den, which is a pitch contest. It's in Canada. I know it's in England. And for our listeners in other areas, it's kind of like Shark Tank as well, the same premise. How did you get there? What made you become an entrepreneur in the first place?
Yeah, it was actually 15 years ago because I had my 6-week-old son, and I brought him on the show with me. And it was all accidental. I was supposed to be a teacher. That's where, I have my degree from Ottawa U. And I just started making baby moccasins for my second baby in a new sort of style. And I went to powwows and would set up a booth, just like, how everybody in Indigenous community does. And it really picked up. And I said, I think I think I'm onto something and I love doing it. And it feels like so empowering to be able to like do something you love. And that was pretty much it. And someone, said, have you ever heard of this show Dragons Den? So I went on YouTube and watched a bunch and showed up 5 days before my son was born, very big, very pregnant, and drove to Montreal with my 3 kids and went and auditioned live in person. And they said, we don't usually say this to people, but clearly you're like expecting. So when is a good time for you to come and be on the show? And the rest is sort of history. I didn't realize at the time. It was just sort of like, this is fun. And I like to have fun. So that's sort of how it started. And then, I still kind of like to think like that, but now I realize, now that we're a nonprofit, I'm like, oh, this is for realsies now. Like,
Very
so
cool. So what does it feel like in front of the dragons? I mean, we all see it on TV and we see the mini clips of like 8 or 10 minutes, but what does it feel like actually walking through the doors and having to pitch, something you're so passionate about to 4 or 5 strangers?
I actually wish I could go back and do it again with this, how I feel now and where I'm at in my own like human journey. Because at the time I was like postpartum, right? You're still sort of like, the baby's 6 weeks old and he was born with Down syndrome and cerebral
Mm.
palsy, which I didn't know. So
Mhm.
that anybody who has a special needs baby understands how like, wow, like your mind is just trying to like process, process, process. And so in my mind, that probably didn't feel as big as it would feel now because I had so much heart work that I was trying to process with the
Mhm.
birth of my son. So it was exciting. As soon as I walked off, like with all the cameras and all of that, I like burst into tears. Like they were trying to interview me, and I was just like I don't even remember what happened after that. But then they told me, prepare. And we had so many women from my community. We'd meet at the band office and we prepared for months and months. And my whole basement was full of baby moccasins. And once it aired, like I think it was like 7:30 at night or something like that. My BlackBerry at the time was just going bing, 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 bing. And I was sold out by midnight. And this was like
Wow.
months of several, like, a huge group of women preparing. So I wasn't prepared at all for what would happen, but I think that experience led me to like how I, like to work on projects now. And now I'm like, okay, we might need to be a little bit more prepared.
The first time you're an entrepreneur, and I remember in my 20s with the same with me, I don't think you can prepare until you actually do it. And I mean, I come from a family of entrepreneurs and everyone tries to explain it to you. Went to university for business, and then I don't think I learned anything until my
Mm.
first day of being in my own business.
Wow, I love that. I feel like people don't say that enough.
It's just how do you and people, you've got to go out and build the right product and you've got to source the right materials and you've got to be proud of what you're doing, but it's got to be priced right and you've got to make money and oh, you got to pay rent on Friday. And people talk about it. You hear so many people, especially from textbooks, going, oh, and this is what they feel. But until you until you go out there and like, I'm sure well, it sounds like your moccasins went very quickly, but you go out there and you show this baby moccasin or whatever I was selling, and it's your heart and soul. It's not a moccasin. And
Mhm.
and from what I hear from you, I mean, you had dozens of women who had also taken the time and put their heart and soul into producing, to become prepared to, even if you did sell out at midnight. And I just don't, until you do it, I
Mhm.
just don't think you can really ever explain it.
Mhm. Agree completely. And there's nothing you could do but just like learn the mistakes and like, okay, so how do we do it a little bit better next time? And then just keep, bumping into the walls and
Yeah.
like, making those
But
decisions.
but there also must have been an amazing sort of community joy at midnight, if you will. I mean, even if you didn't have enough or weren't perfectly prepared, that holy cow, we got the money and everybody loved what we're doing. I mean, that's pretty special.
It was. I ended up and I kept that business, the numbers never worked. And I had never done like wholesale, and that's what people wanted, or
Hmm.
an online shop. I didn't even, I wasn't tech savvy. It was in the time of Blackberries. It was like such a different time. So like you had to print, it was just like chaos all the time. But I stepped up to bat 3 times, and like I had to close my business, life, divorce, all that. You know
Right.
how kind of gets in the way of things, and
Yep.
opened up again, and it didn't work again, and then opened up again. It's like I couldn't let it go because I loved it so much. Even with my other projects and stuff, like I have Powwow Pitch now, and I have her braids, and I kind of do my own thing as a contractor. I still like feel it in my heart. Like I'll every once in a while I'll make a pair of, it was called Quemi's baby moccasins, and I'll make a pair and I'll gift it. And I'm like, oh, like it still brings me back to a time where, taking that leap feels so scary. And it is so scary, but like so rewarding that, like you said, only people who have taken the leap can actually ever understand.
Yeah. And it's funny because, and I don't know if this is good advice or not, but a lot of times people will say to me, oh, I've been thinking about being an entrepreneur for so long now, and when's the right time? And it's been years. And I sort of look at them and go, you know what? It probably will never be the right time for you. And I don't mean that I mean that in a positive way, even though it doesn't sound like a nice phrase, but the truth is you went out and just took that leap. I mean, I went out and we did it when we were expecting our first child. And that I'm more like, if you're going to do it and you're crazy enough to do it, that to me is something you need,
Mhm.
not to ponder. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who've thought about doing something for 10 years and then became successful being an entrepreneur. But I'm just trying to say that the passion and the audacity that you show, that I think is pretty important for entrepreneurs.
Well, and really that's why I love to surround myself with entrepreneurs, because you feel that I'm just going to do it. Even if it's not perfect, they're action takers. So,
Yeah.
people talk the talk, but like entrepreneurs walk it and live it. And like you get inspired.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
you're inspired to do your work because you're like, it's like you're feeding off of each other too. So, like, favorite humans, entrepreneurs.
Yeah. And it's funny because you talked about you went to Ottawa U for teaching, and now you're doing this. I think you actually are teaching. I,
Yeah.
I think you're imparting so much knowledge and so much emotion and passion with that knowledge that maybe this is why you went to learn how to teach, if you will. So I don't know. I think you really are a teacher.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So my degree didn't go to waste, is the is the
I I
lesson
don't I
here.
don't think it did, and I think somewhere probably helped you get to the powwow pitch
Mm.
and build a community that's supportive of one another. So that's I've known you now for 19 minutes, but that is my 19-minute takeaway in speaking and listening to how you talk about things. So you mentioned a little bit about reconciliation. So how does Indigenous entrepreneurship serve as a tool for economic reconciliation within First Nations communities?
Oh, I don't even know how to answer that question because it's so layered. Like there's so many things going on at the same time. I think of the reserve system that was imposed on us, where we couldn't leave our reserves until, like, I feel like it was 1957, if I'm around that time. So my mom was already born, and our community used to have to get a permission slip from what was the Indian agent who, lived in the area to literally leave the community. So, and then our children were taken away. Like my uncle was taken away to residential school. There was so many people in our community. So like we talk about this and like, that is literally, I just screenshotted something. That is literally the root of all of the, the oppression and the, it was systemic. The reason
Right.
for was so that we lose pride in ourselves and that we don't like how we are, how we do things, the color of our skin, our practices, all of that. And so by doing this at a powwow, which we weren't allowed to dance, we weren't allowed to smudge, we weren't allowed to practice these things, which are all rooted in love, really. It's all about like loving and accepting and all that stuff. And so bringing that back and talking about fair trade and being good in our community and giving back. And it's this idea of reciprocity that always comes back to the way that we do things. I feel like that is just reclaiming how we were, how we used to do business, although it wasn't called business back then, but how we interact with each other and how we interact with people around us. I think going back to our roots, the way that we see Indigenous business, it's interesting because I think it was the second year, someone, I had never heard this term, but someone told me, oh my gosh, they're all social entrepreneurs. And I didn't know what a social
Mm.
entrepreneur was. And I was like, okay, like that's great. I don't even know. I barely knew
Mhm.
what the word entrepreneur was even at the time. And I'm running a pitch competition. And so, she explained to me what social entrepreneurs are. And, she came back the next year and that's what we are. So I feel like we really are the pioneers just based on the way that we're raised and our teachings of reciprocity, of being good, you know what I mean? Being honest, truthful, courage, all that stuff. And so I think there's something to be really proud of. So, when I think of reconciliation, we are reclaiming, number one, what was taken from us. And number two, we are opening that door for the bridge for Canadians to join us and say, would you like to be a part of this? Because we would love to have you. But if you walk across this bridge and meet us halfway, this is what we expect. Meaning it's our way of doing things. And it's just like human goodness, really. And we're going to do things, maybe it's slower, but we're going to think about our elders. We're going to think about our youth and that they're always invited. So you don't have to get childcare for moms. You don't have to, you bring your family. It's all
Mhm.
inclusive and they're going to learn too. And your aunties and your grandparents, they're going to support you. So it's very much community oriented in everything that we do. Remember I told you I forget what questions
No,
are?
but it's a perfect answer because humanity is lost in a lot of what we do today, and I think that building communities, as you described, is so critical because the next generation, and everybody talks about the next generation, and they want to, save the environment and do this and do that. But you go on social media, and I'm sorry, they're the most cruel generation I've ever seen. The things that people now believe they can say to one another, and the bullying, and across all the countries I've been to, of like teenagers, also like it's bizarrely awful. And I think that creating the community the way that you describe it is it's kind of a regeneration for all of us if we can embrace it.
Yep, I'm hoping that I have four children. I hope that they see that. I think they do. I know my older ones understand because they've been part of the process, and if you go back in the day, like they're holding the microphone, they're getting, they're not getting paid to do this, but they're here to be part of our community. And
Hmm.
part of it is showing up and helping in any way that you can. It doesn't have to be huge, but like everybody, working together. And so, yeah, I like how, thank you. I appreciate how you said it. And that is my goal. And, to do that. help be a part of that change.
So there's something else that you mentioned sort of off the top of that part of our discussion about not being allowed to celebrate or to sing or dance. Did I understand that right?
Yeah.
Can you expand on that? Because why weren't you? And I'm sorry if I'm just extremely ignorant.
No, just the Indian agents didn't permit. The church didn't permit. They came in, they changed our names. My name wasn't Tenasco before, like not my name, but my family's name. It was Tendesi, and which means blue jay. And they said we can't pronounce that. So they changed it to Tenasco. Same amount of letters, same first three letters. It was literally just to rip our identity from us. And that being one, residential schools, our children, they literally got beaten because we were trying to speak our language. So yeah, song and dance was part of it. And now, and people not from necessarily our community, because we just sort of like stayed in our community, but anybody who, 60s scoop who got taken away and put in, Canadian homes and stuff, who not lost, sorry, their identity was taken from them. I'm trying to get in the habit of reframing it,
Right.
fact. And people were ashamed of who they were, so it was sort of starting to work. So now I think we're just coming back to that. Ribbon skirts have made a resurgence. People are proud to wear our Indigenous attire, our regalia, our earrings, we're like, no, we are here because that was taken from us. And if you go to any powwow, any powwow, just at a powwow this weekend, the MC is surely going to remind you of that. We dance because this was taken from us. And if you're just a beginner, that's okay. Welcome to the circle.
We've welcomed a number of Indigenous entrepreneurs from, I'll say, across North America. And I got to say that for me, I've always been a proud Canadian until this started coming to light, and the absolute full body sickness I felt to find out this part of our history. And it's not just our history. I understand that it's not just taking back your heritage. It's how many generations will it take to become fully ingrained? Yeah, I'm mumbling through it, but it's mind blowing to me.
Around like September 30th, it kind of resurfaces a lot, but it's just beautiful. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. And that just like is very big in Indigenous communities. And so
that is beautiful. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. That I will remember for a long time. Her Braids. What is Her Braids, and tell us about clean drinking water?
Yeah. 40% of our community, I don't know like to this day, but as of last year, still doesn't have clean drinking water. We are beside the French town of Maniwaki, and everybody there has clean drinking water. And we have blue jugs, the big water jugs delivered to our house every week. And it didn't even occur to me for some reason, when you just live it, you just take things like, oh, this is life. It's not this is life. And until a water pipe broke in Gatineau, Quebec. And there was such a sense of urgency. And I was hearing it on the radio every hour on the hour, and people were losing their minds. And they were like, what do we do? Can I feed this to my baby? As like they were just in a panic. And I was like, oh, they don't, oh. And then probably by the third or fourth hour after hearing it and people were calling in, that's when I don't know, something clicked and I got really angry about that. And I was like, and I wrote in and everything to the radio station. And I was like, why aren't you doing this for our community? And we listen to your radio station every hour on the hour. And anyways, they tore up that entire street, and there's paved there, by the way, and it's all, there's sidewalks and all that. in Gatineau, and they went in the machines, and everybody had clean drinking water within like 4 months. And it was a bit, and I was like, 4 months, not 14 years, 4 months. And so I decided to start something to bring awareness about it, because I started talking about that because I was really, really angry about it. It touched something in me, the injustice. It was like, oh, it's because we're Indigenous. Because if they can get clean water to the town of Maniwaki, they can absolutely. And it was just like provincial, like, you know what I mean? It was just like, oh, this is not our responsibility. And
Mhm.
so it was sort of that sort of thing. And it was to create those conversations. And I took everything I learned from my first business, baby moccasins, and I was like, well, I know how to bead, and I know how to give workshops, and I know how to do this. So I'm going to create this movement. And I created beaded pendants, and just to talk about clean drinking water. And it just did really well. And I started like talking about it. And then I wrote my first children's book called Nabee's Water Song. And now I get to go around and like talk about this clean water issue. And it's still so interesting to me, because according to the Health Canada and Government of Canada's website, we are not on there anymore. Like it seems like we have clean water, and we do, for it's a band-aid solution. So yes, we have our jugs of water, but like we're still showering. And how much water do you use
Mhm.
to make rice and pasta and whatever you're cooking? Like it's a lot of water. And so I'm kind of, we still have to have some conversations about that. And so I do my work, I do it joyfully. Yes, it's still there. I feel like I'm not as angry as I was when I first started, because I feel like I'm doing something. And every time I give a reading, and every time someone talks about Nabee's Water Song, there's a very, it talks about the clean water issue in Canada. And sorry, I feel like I need to say this because it's like so interesting. So Scholastics published Nabee's Water Song in
Mm.
Canada, and Lee and Low is the publisher in the United States. And
Okay.
so in the book, at one part, it says she went knock on the door with the green roof. And I thought people would understand that. And the woman from the with the green roof, she goes and she gives her a blue bottle of water and shoos her away. And then she's thirsty again, and she knocks on that door with the green roof, the fancy shiny house with the green roof, and no one answers this time. And so that was directly speaking to my situation and our community. And so when Lee and Lowe, they went through a thorough interview with me, like why this book and all this and that, and they added a page that's not in the Canadian issue, but we added a whole other page where a bunch of dancers are walking towards Parliament Hill in the back, and it's being led by a red jingle dress, and the red is sort of symbolic for MMIW, and a jingle dancer is our healing dancer. And so Chief Ladybird was our illustrator, and when I first seen that, like, I'm getting emotional talking about it. So powerful, like, wow, beautiful. Like she did that on her own. I just came up with the words, and she just made this like statement piece. And so yeah, again, no idea what question you asked me, but that's sort of like her braids. That's what it was.
Well, Sunshine Tenasco, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, even if some of the topics are, well, they're unearthing some of the harsh realities that not just we as Canadians, but and I think communities around the world need to learn a little bit more of today. Thank you so much for being on the show, for sharing, anything we can do in the future to get your message out. You know where we are. And I'll just leave by saying, yeah, you're a wonderful teacher. The passion in which you express yourself, I think you may be expressing your teaching through entrepreneurship, but you do have the path of that. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me and for your kind words.